On July 26, 2023, I got started on the biggest Minecraft project I have ever worked on. The goal was to recreate the entirety of Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex from Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach RUIN in Minecraft. However, I didn't just want to recreate the location itself, but also the entirety of the gameplay to go along with it. And now, after almost 2 entire years of working on this project, I have done just that, where every accessible area, every animatronic, and almost every single gameplay mechanic has been added, and you're now able to download and explore this map for yourself. This build has a total of 1,550,843 blocks, with 12,291 of them being the command blocks that make everything in this build functional. This includes the main entrance lobby, Monty's Gator Golf, the Superstar Daycare, the Monty Golf Catwalks, the bakery, the server rooms, the Glamrock Beauty Salon, Foxy's Log Ride, the Roxy Raceway, Bonnie Ball, Fazzablast, and finally, the Sinkhole and Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place. Now, longtime viewers of the channel will know that this is not my first time building the Mega Pizzaplex, as soon after Security Breach released in late 2021, I also started recreating the entire game for the fun and love of it. So when the Ruin DLC was revealed in May of 2022, I knew that I wasn't done with Security Breach just yet, as I once again wanted to take on the challenge of taking everything that I'd built, but converting it into what's seen in Ruin. What I wasn't expecting though was the amount of changes that the DLC made to the layout of the Pizzaplex, as entire locations and attractions were added in between existing areas, or even rotated in ways that made it impossible for me to reuse what I'd already built. On top of that, my original build had some inaccuracies which wouldn't have worked with the new one, which finally led me to decide to rebuild the entire Pizzaplex again from the very beginning. Let's start with the main entrance lobby, which was the very first part of the build that I worked on. Instead of just going at it without any planning though, I outlined the entire area beforehand to give me the size and shape of the room, while also marking down every individual detail with different colored concrete. I was able to do this by having both Minecraft and Security Breach opened on a second monitor throughout the entire building process, which helped me get a better look at what I was actually building. This is something that I've always done when recreating other games, and is something that I would continue to do throughout the rest of this project as well. And though this gave me a proper reference to follow from, I had never built in a rundown or post-apocalyptic style in Minecraft before, so I was learning and using different building techniques that I wasn't used to. This build took a total of 14 hours and 7 minutes to make, but it also helped prepare me for what the rest of this project would be like. Moving on in a counterclockwise order meant that the daycare was next, which undoubtedly went through the most amount of changes throughout the project. Making a bright blue room look withered and run down was pretty difficult for me at the time, as I wasn't sure what blocks to use to add in the details that I wanted. This isn't helped by the fact that there aren't that many blue blocks in Minecraft to begin with, but I eventually did find a block combination that made the build look so much better. But building the daycare again meant that I also needed to recreate the play structures again, which was easily the thing I was most worried about working on. Making tight and narrow walkways in such a small area is especially difficult when only one block can be placed in the same place, and I wanted to make sure that the design of them was more accurate compared to my original one. So with the use of lots and lots of trapdoors, I was able to make more space for me to walk around, while also getting the layout to be just like what's seen in game. Just by themselves, each play structure took over an hour to build. Finally, along with the daycare itself, I also built the storage warehouse that connects to Monty Golf, which led to this part of the build taking a total of 18 hours and 13 minutes to complete. Now, it was at this point in the build where I was already starting to get burnt out, as the outlines for Monty Golf ended up being the most difficult to put together by far. This was also around the time where I was really starting to get into command blocks, and it had already been a month since my last gameplay project. And despite the fact that I loved Ruin and wanted to get the build done, forcing myself to do something that I wasn't all interested in wasn't going to get me anywhere, so I decided to take my first break from the project and recreated the gameplay of Five Nights at Candy's Remastered instead. Getting a little off topic for a second, I get a lot of comments asking me how I'm able to stay motivated for such a long time, but the truth is even I get burnt out as well. This was something I talked about a lot during my original Pizzaplex build, and it's important to have fun and pace yourself when working on such big projects like this one. And it turns out that a break was exactly what I needed, as once I returned to the outlines, I was able to get them done much faster than any other area, despite them being the most challenging. The finished build itself even ended up being my favorite part of the entire build even to this day, as the mix of green colors with the rest of the ruined attraction worked together really well. I even decided to get the catwalks done during the same episode, which added such a fun environment and helped to complete the look of the build. In the end, the build time lasted 17 hours and 5 minutes. The final attraction on the east side of the Pizzaplex is the bakery, which was the first time a build was mostly made up of brand new areas. Obviously there is the bakery itself from Security Breach, but there's also a bonus kitchen above it, as well as all of the server rooms that span behind it. These were still really fun to put together, as my favorite parts of Security Breach and Ruin was finding new and hidden ways that the Pizzaplex connects to itself in other areas. This build also has one of my favorite details from Ruin, with that being the giant destroyed Glamrock Freddy statue underneath the center back room. The AR world has lots of fun differences compared to the real Pizzaplex, but nothing comes close to this, where it was both a challenge and a lot of fun to make something like this at this scale. And it's a shame that we never get to see what this room looks like without the mask, as this is the only area in Ruin which only exists in an AR form. Despite being a smaller build, the range it covers going across the entire Pizzaplex caused this build to take 15 hours and 36 minutes to complete. Before I was able to build the beauty salon, the project once again ran into another delay, but this time because another FNAF game was released before I could even finish on this one. FNAF in 2023 saw the release of not only Ruin, but also the first movie and Help Wanted 2 at the end of the year. And though I wanted Ruin to be my main priority, I enjoyed Help Wanted 2 so much and really wanted to recreate some of its minigames in a VR form. I didn't even get time to think about the FNAF movie, as working on 2 projects at once was already way too much for me to handle. So after working on Help Wanted 2 for a couple of months, I returned to Ruin, and this time I wasn't going to stop until the entire build was complete. I may eventually go back and recreate more minigames from Help Wanted 2 and maybe even the FNAF movie at some point, but at the rate that content has been releasing recently, it has become very difficult for me to keep up with them, especially with how many companies are currently working on the franchise. But moving back to the beauty salon, it was a big difference from looking at command blocks for 2 months to building massive mountains inside an even bigger room. Now these are surprisingly simple and quite relaxing to make, but they are also extremely time consuming. In fact, I wanted to spend a little more time in the beauty salon, as it was one of those locations from my first map that was smaller than it should have been. This time I made sure that all of the mountains had the same shape, the rubble fell across the same places, and even the interior was trashed in the same way as in game. However, I didn't just leave it there, as I also built the second attraction in this chapter, with that being Foxy's Log Ride. This area is a little more under construction than in Ruins, so it was a fun twist while also sticking to the same look as the beauty salon. Attractions based around set biomes like Monty Golf and the salon are some of my favorites to build, as not only do they let me build in different styles, but it also helps me learn what blocks I could use in different environments. In all, it took around 18 hours and 38 minutes for me to build these attractions. The log ride then brings us to the Roxy Raceway itself, which is undoubtedly the biggest location in Ruin. And though it's literally split into 2 parts in 2 different chapters, I wasn't about to just build half of it instead of doing it all at once. The walkways on either side of the room are really the only accessible places to go through, but the track itself is also included, which has even been damaged and bent around. The track does eventually get cut off when it reaches the underground areas, but I still decided to add them in despite not being visible or having any ruin to it. It just wouldn't have felt right leaving the raceway out of the Roxy Raceway. I was even able to have another attempt at the giant mural art instead of just reusing my original design, as this raceway ended up being much taller and wider than my first one. Ironically, the only thing that stayed the same is the foundation where the sinkhole elevator is, which stayed in the same form as in Security Breach, but still had a few redesigns for what this build has, like the oil trail that the blob leaves across the entire Pizzaplex. With how big and full of detail this room is by itself, it's easy to see how it took a total of 34 hours and 19 minutes to complete. Before we move on though, a quick fun fact about the Roxy Raceway is how it's not actually aligned with the beauty salon anymore in Ruin, for some reason. While I could have kept it this way if I were making a more faithful recreation, I was somehow able to connect the two while still getting all of the details in place. So instead of having this mess, the spectator booth and the floor levels both connect to each other in the way that they should. You're welcome for saving the ruined Pizzaplex. I know, I do a lot. Up next is Bonnie Bull, which was the first time I was able to complete an entire location in just under a single week instead of my usual 2-week time frame. This build is not where it should be. And I don't mean that I built it wrong, I mean that Steelwall took Bonnie Bull and literally rotated it 180 degrees just so it could connect back to the Roxy Raceway by using this doorway, which also shouldn't lead to this hallway. But personal grudges aside, the bowling alley has a lot going on with it, even for being a smaller attraction. Because it's spread out over a large area, there's lots of long and narrow hallways, which was a nice change from the giant rooms of the Pizzaplex. In fact, even though there are a few larger rooms, most of Bonnie Bull is still sectioned off in ways that turn the open areas into smaller walkways. And to spoil a bit of what's to come, the hidden backroom and even Glamrock Bonnie himself are included with the map, as it was always a needed and iconic scene from Ruin. The build took a total of 12 hours and 9 minutes to complete. Arguably the most trashed building in Ruin, Fazablast was actually originally going to be grouped with Bonnie Bull until I saw just how much was going on with it. Not only are parts of the arena still standing, but falling catwalks and support beams made it very difficult to tell what I was even looking at. I basically had to get the walkway of the chase sequence done during the outline, as it twists and turns over itself while also going from the center of the room to the corner on the opposite side. Even with that though, almost everything in this area is still accessible to the player, from the security office all the way to the maze itself. Surprisingly, it only took me 9 hours and 17 minutes to build Fazablast, despite the amount of headaches and redesigns I had while planning, and it also ended up being one of my favorite parts of the build. And at last we reach Chapter 9 and the sinkhole under the Roxy Raceway, which right away starts with the sinkhole itself. For being the grand finale of the build, I was very nervous about getting started, as this chapter of Ruin is mostly made up of cave and tunnel networks instead of an actual building. This made outlining everything extremely difficult, as not only does everything look the same, but trying to get a 3D sense of rocky walls is pretty much impossible. Weirdly though, I find this area to be the most visually appealing part of the entire project, as bright blue stalactites and dripping water turn an abandoned horror setting into an almost magical environment. Eventually though, the building does lead to an actual building, which is a continuation of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place from the Burn Trap ending, and what I can only assume to be Murray's costume manor later on. Secret of the Mimic isn't out just yet by the time I'm making this, so he can come back and make fun of me later on if my prediction is wrong. And though this is once again another ruined pizzeria, the ruin itself is different than above, as there's a lot more rocky and earth-toned colors due to this place being so deep underground. The Burn Trap hallways did get a redesign, but more excitingly now lead down to the Mimic's basement even further underground. The final stretch of the building is then the tunnel network that leads to the scooping room and the elevator hallway at the end of the game. To make this area more exciting, however, I also added the first animatronic models to the world, with those being the two mascot costumes of the bird and the elephant, and of course the Mimic itself. Though building the Pizzaplex was completed after another 16 hours and 15 minutes of building this chapter, adding these details was just the start of the next part of the project, as I of course wanted to take things even further. Before we take a look at the gameplay though, there's a huge part of this build that I've yet to bring up, which takes over half the Pizzaplex itself. Just after entering Monty Golf in Chapter 1, we find the security or Vanny mask, which plays a huge part of the gameplay. So much so that putting it on takes us to a completely different version of the build in an augmented reality. Now while the room itself stays the same, exaggerated versions of decorations and items start to appear or disappear, all while a glitching purple texture starts to take over different parts of the attractions. So as I was building each area of the Pizzaplex, I was then tasked with adding in this copy along with it with all of the changes in the new world. To stop me from having to build everything again by hand though, I made a copy of each attraction by using World Edit and pasted it exactly 85 blocks under the original one. From there, I just had to change the position of certain objects, sometimes adding in some new ones, and then finish by replacing parts of the build with the glitching textures. Magenta colored blocks as well as crying obsidian worked perfectly for this, as it has the same corrupted look while also acting as a light source. To then give the build even more atmosphere, I changed the biome to a nether crimson forest, which changes the fog to a bright pink and causes particles to float in the air. I was really surprised as to how perfectly this worked for the build, and it helped make these AR variants just as fun to explore as the real ones. Now, traveling to the AR world is technically where the first gameplay appears, as I also added in the Vanny mask, which works exactly just like in Ruin. By left-clicking with the item in my hand, I hit an interaction entity, which then teleports me to my exact position, but 85 blocks beneath where I was standing. This gives the illusion that I haven't actually moved, when in reality, I'm standing in a completely different build. Returning back to the real world then works in the exact same way, where left-clicking will then power the same command blocks, but will then teleport me 85 blocks up again in the exact same place where I just was. It's a very simple system that even still plays a huge role in this map. There's still one more build to look at, however, as once I was done with the main game, I was then able to add my own custom addition to the build, with that being the exterior. I gave my original Pizzaplex a massive parking lot and a custom look at the outside, and I wanted to do the same thing this time, but change it to fit the ruined look. This time though, I wanted the outside to feel more crammed together instead of just focusing on the scale of it all. This uses a mix of decorations from inside of the Pizzaplex, as well as some unique details like more graffiti and scaffolding, leaving only one way to get to the entrance itself. I also wanted to make sure that the environment was run down by adding lots of holes and cracks in the road, and mixing different shades of green and brown to make the grass look like nature is starting to take over again. As for the Pizzaplex itself, I started by using brighter colors and adding neon lights, and then going back over it again a second time and adding in all the texturing and withering details across the walls. To then top it off, I added a massive sign above the main entrance with the name Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex, and made parts of it angled to show how it's falling off the supports. The final detail is then the scaffolding that Cassie uses to get inside the Pizzaplex itself, where instead of just making this part of the gameplay, I recreated the entire cutscene by using a mix of teleport commands and armor stand models to make it just like the start of Ruin. And this ended up being one of my favorite sequences to recreate, as it makes the moments before exploring the Pizzaplex much more exciting, while also adding some extra polish to the map itself. At this point in the project, it had been well over a full year since I started on the build, and over 3 months since my last gameplay recreation. So to scratch the itch of wanting to use more command blocks again, I spent the next month recreating another FNAF game, with that being Five Nights at Candy's 2. And believe it or not, but this project actually inspired a lot of features for Ruin, as not only was I starting to make my armor stand models even more detailed, but I'd also updated to version 1.20.4 of Minecraft. Because this project has been in the works for so long, it's gone through multiple versions of Minecraft, starting in 1.18.1, then to 1.20.4, and eventually 1.21.1 where it's currently at now. With new updates means more blocks to use, but more importantly for me, more commands. So after getting some practice with the new features, I went back to Ruin to update some areas with new blocks for texturing details, and to finally add in the first working feature. The core part of a FNAF game is of course the animatronics, and I wanted to see how I could recreate full gameplay scenarios by using a mix of free roam and scripted mechanics. At first, I made a model of Monty from the base game and had him roam around the atrium, but getting too close to him would cause him to start chasing after me. To then apply this mechanic to Ruin, I recreated the sequence from the Roxy Raceway and lure Roxy around by using the speaker system in the cameras. Now while I would eventually remove this for the final map, what it did do is prepare me for another core mechanic which would be featured, with that being the FNAF security system. Using the same model techniques as Monty and Roxy, I was able to make a pretty accurate Mexus model by only using a mix of armor stands and a single custom player head. 3 armor stands make up the main body, while 2 more are used for the arms and the ear, and an additional one to control where Mexus is looking at. All of these armor stands are then teleported over an invisible zombie and hooked up to a timer system, making it so that if I'm in the AR world for too long, the zombie will then teleport up to the build and start chasing after me. To then make the appearance more random, I placed hundreds of marker entities around the entire map and set up mexes to teleport to a random one within 10 to 15 blocks from the player. This makes sure that Mexus is only going to appear in the same room as me and isn't going to appear on the opposite side of the world. Now if Mexus ends up getting too close to the player, it isn't actually going to call an animatronic to the area, as I instead wanted them to already be free roaming around their attractions. But before I was even able to get to that, it was once again that time of year where another 4 FNAF games were released within the same week in August of 2024 for the 10-year anniversary of the franchise. Now while this meant more awesome games for everyone else to play, it meant that I had to add even more games to the already growing backlog of FNAF games that I haven't recreated yet. Honestly though, the RUIN project had already been in development for so long, I wasn't even annoyed with another delay to it, especially since I was able to recreate Into the Pit, the office demo for the Joy of Creations remake, and parts and service levels from Help Wanted during this time. That last one was completely optional, but I thought it would be another way for me to get used to the new commands for 1.21. So when I said that this project has been in the works for over a span of 2 years, I wasn't joking, but I was a little misleading with the reasoning of it. I just wasn't able to work on it all in one go because of the flood of other cool things that kept releasing. But hey, at least RUIN is done now, and I get a chance to go back to all of those previous projects. More on that later. This brings us to 2025, and I finally decided that this project is getting done this year, as otherwise it might never get finished. And to help make sure that I was getting work done, I started a series of live streams where I was actively adding in all of the important gameplay mechanics, ranging from the Faz Wrench conduits, to the security nodes, to the wet floor bots, and even the hundreds of doors across the entire Pizzaplex. These span over 50 hours of pure command block work, so if you're interested in a very detailed development process behind these mechanics, I highly recommend checking those live streams out. At the same time that this was happening, I was also going through the entire Pizzaplex again to add in some proper lighting and other smaller features that I wanted added in the final map. And though you'd think that lighting up in dark environment would be relatively simple, I had to be careful not to have too much lighting in the spots where there are and keep it natural. Now while most of the build does stay without lights, it is still possible to see some of the major details and make your way across a room. For those dark and scary places though, I added in a working flashlight to emit extra light when walking by areas without any. Making my way back to the animatronics though, I was finally able to add in armor stand models of all of them and then attach them to wandering entities just like with Mexus. Instead of using a zombie though, each animatronic has a villager control its movement so that way it doesn't get in the way of exploration. This includes Monty in Gator Golf and the catwalks, Eclipse in the daycare play structures, 2 endoskeletons outside the daycare which actually start to move when you don't look at them and stop moving once you do, Glamrock Chica in the bakery, Roxy in the beauty salon and the raceway, 5 wind-up mini music men in Bonnie Ball, and Glamrock Freddy in Fazablast. That said, there are some exceptions where an animatronic does also use a hostile mob to chase after the player, with a prime example being the Mimic in the basement. If anyone in this map was going to act hostile towards the player, it had to be the Mimic, as now it's also able to go through the chase sequence through the cave tunnels all the way to the elevator ending. And there may or may not be a way to access the scooping room and another animatronic by doing a few secret side quests throughout the Pizzaplex. That'll be something that I let you find out on your own though. Speaking of hidden side quests throughout the Pizzaplex, you're not just able to walk around wherever you want, as you will eventually come across a locked door that needs to be opened. This is where the last item comes in, with that being the Faz Wrench conduits, where throwing it is then going to teleport the player to the conduit minigame. 5 brand new items are used to play the game, with the main ones powering each of the conduits and the other one to exit the game. Holding one of these items will charge the connected wire by slowly replacing the glass block with a full block all the way until it reaches the limit at the far left side of it. Letting go of the item will then cause the charge to decrease, and it's our job to get each charge within the blue lines of each conduit. There are 19 of these scattered around the building, and each one has to be done in order to unlock the next attraction. Another type of minigame are the security node puzzles that this time are only going to appear in the AR world. These require a mix of deactivating child nodes before then getting access to the main node to unlock a new area. Instead of them being block built though like the conduits, each security node has 3 base armor stands and an additional armor stand with stained glass around it to indicate how many child nodes there are in the area. In Ruin, these nodes would have wires leading to them, but here they simply emit red particles while holding the flashlight in our hand. Left clicking with the Faz wrench is then going to power a command block, which is then going to change one of the glass blocks to turn blue. Once all of them have been deactivated, the entire security node is going to change from red to blue and is now able to be accessed. This was where I struggled the most when coming up with a minigame design, as there are a lot of different factors in play with how many icons there are, where they can or can't go, and how I'm even able to play them. But after banging my head on my desk and multiple days of redesigning, I eventually came up with a top-down sliding puzzle using the normal controls to move each icon across the board. Once one line connects to the other, the next one is going to become playable, and so on and so forth until all of the icons connect to each other and complete the minigame. If the icon touches another line though, or another icon, the board is then going to start over by resetting the line. There are 12 of these in total in the build, and I'm really proud of how they all turned out. While not a minigame or a core gameplay mechanic, this map does also include all 32 wet floor bots, which are also made up of smaller armor stand models. These guys are so much fun in both the base game and here in Ruin, where walking up to it will just cause it to stare at you. Putting on the mask will also cause them to teleport down to the AR world, where just like with the glam rocks, their armor stand will change to fit with the new environment. And if you're a heartless bastard, you can also deactivate them by left clicking with the Faz wrench. This will deactivate them and cause a command block scoreboard to start increasing, which you guessed leads up to the secret Glamrock Bonnie room in Bonnie Bowl. Originally, Bonnie was just a mix of carpets and half slabs, but I did eventually give him his own 3D model just like in-game. This isn't the only hidden secret in the map though, as I also thought it would be a fun idea to also add in every single collectible from both the AR world and the real one. These can be found in the exact same spots as in Ruin, and clicking on them will then cause them to disappear in purple mist as text pops up to tell you what you got. Now, I would absolutely be considered a crazy person if I were to also model all 48 of those collectibles and then have them displayed somewhere in the map, but surprise, that's exactly what I did. By holding the purple backpack in my hotbar and then left clicking on it, I'm then teleported to a custom collection hallway where all of the plushies, pinatas, lunchboxes, and even comic pages that I found are on display to look at. Each is labeled with a text display above it, and the AR collectibles even include a purple mist to show off that they're not actually real. Despite that though, walking up to any of them will then show off the item's actual description from Ruin. Most of the collectibles themselves are more scaled down armor stand models, but there are a few interesting ones like the 8 comic pages. I want to remind you that this project doesn't use mods of any kind, so my way around making this work was to make map art of each comic and have it set onto an invisible item frame. I use map art for a lot of my projects like this, but never for smaller details, as it can start to take away the Minecraft look of the build. Either way, it was quite fun to collect them all on my own and slowly start to see the hallway fill up. With all of that gameplay being said though, maybe you just want to explore this map and aren't that interested in the gameplay that I've spent a year recreating. Well, luckily for you, there are a few options, as in the starting room of the map there's a toggle system to turn all of this gameplay on and off. Turning it off is then going to unlock all of the doors, disable all security nodes, and let you roam freely around the building. Doing this though will cause all of the mechanics to reset, meaning if you've already unlocked some of the puzzles, you will have to start all over again once you turn the gameplay back on. The other option is to completely skip over all of the command stuff and download the second version of this world, which not only gets rid of most of the command blocks, but will probably reduce the amount of lag which how much there was. The animatronics and doors are still going to be there, but all of the extra entities like security nodes and collectibles are going to be removed. I wanted to make sure that you had a choice for how you want to experience this map, and I think that this was the best way to go about it. But that, however, pretty much covers everything I wanted to talk about with this project. It's honestly hard to believe that I've been working on something for this long, and even funnier to think that I'm still making videos on a game that was released nearly 4 years ago. I was thinking about this not that long ago, where Security Breach has been a huge part of my life for over 5 years, and it's crazy to think that this just might be my last video on the game. After this, I've completed not only the base Pizzaplex, but also the Ruin DLC and most of its gameplay to go along with it. It's honestly sad to think about, as Security Breach means so much to me despite what others might think of it. I've literally spent thousands of hours not only playing the game, but now also recreating it in Minecraft just for the fun and love of it. But now I'm finally going to be able to move on to something else, whether that be one of my many unfinished projects that I have, or maybe even something completely original. Maybe something that's not even FNAF related at all. Now obviously there's always the one-off video that I can still make on Security Breach, as there's plenty more mechanics that I can look at, but this is as far as it goes with the game being my main focus. But now let's talk about the elephant in the room, the very big and scary elephant that wants to rip off my limbs and head. At the time that this video comes out, the next FNAF game, Secret of the Mimic, releases in less than 20 days, and I somehow planned this project well enough, or not well enough, to be done just in time for it. They give me a week to unwind, and I'm immediately thrown back into recreating another FNAF game. So Steel Will must really want me to stick to their games, as I'm sure as hell going to be recreating that game when it comes out. It looks awesome, I love the Mimic, and I can't wait to see it in full force in action. But I gotta be honest though, this really is the fun of it. There's a reason why I keep coming back and doing more and more complex things every time within these set time frames, and that's because I love the challenge. Ever since my first Pizzaplex series, I've loved the constant urge to do more and more, and I can't wait to see what I'm going to be doing next. Now, obviously it's important to take breaks along the way, but I think that I've talked enough about that already. But enough of me rambling, let's talk about how you can actually get your hands onto this map. In the description of this video, I've left links to my Planet Minecraft page, with one of them taking you to the Java world and the other one for the Bedrock port. As I mentioned, this world is in 1.21.1, so make sure that you're in that version or above before playing it. And yes, Bedrock players, you are able to download this map as well, though for obvious reasons, it doesn't have nearly as many features as the Java map. Just make sure that you look through all the pages, as I do have some smaller details there, and you'll all be good to go. This project has been one hell of a ride for me, and I can't wait to see what everyone thinks of it. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, that is now going to wrap it up for today's video and my series of recreating Security Breach RUIN in Minecraft. Thank you to everyone so much who stuck around for the entire series, as it's been so much fun to see this project finally come together. And if you're interested in future projects of mine, make sure to subscribe to the channel with notifications turned on, that way you don't miss out on the next time I start on another project just like this one. It would be amazing if the channel could hit 200,000 subscribers before the end of the year, and I'll also be releasing a bunch of my other maps when that happens. But with that being said, thank you everyone so much for watching, and I will of course see you in my next video.